Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our two games is 2010's Professor Layton and the Unwound Future, a puzzling, time-traveling mystery with a score that leads to one of gaming's most emotional gut punches.
After that, it's Masakazu Sugimori's work on the crime-solving courtroom drama of the original Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney.
So that's right, it's a kind of another take on Layton versus Wright, the two seminal narrative adventure game series from the last 10 years plus. I mean, it's two icons. And we certainly remember when they had their crossover game, and that was a fantastic title. But, I mean, for your series, it's looking at kind of the roots of the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm picking what many people consider to be either the best or their favorite entry in the 6 main series Professor Layton games. So definitely a good sort of themed week this week.
Should warn people up front, this is going to be a little bit of a weird episode because we somehow both picked games where the composers, I guess, don't exist.
Or they just don't want to exist on the internet.
They just don't talk to anybody.
Yeah, they just don't want to make their lives known or histories known. I think I was able to pull some stuff together for my composer, but yeah, it was a tough go. There aren't many interviews with these gentlemen out there. But let's start with my game, which is Professor Layton and the Unwound Future. This is the third game in the first Professor Layton trilogy, which to those that haven't played, it's like there's more than one trilogy. It's a Star Wars kind of situation where you get the first 3 games that are in its own time, sequential, and then you get a prequel trilogy that follows. So it's kind of interesting in that regard. But Unwound Future follows the original game, Curious Village, and then the second game, Diabolical Box, at least that's the title in North America, because Professor Layton is a series that is kind of rife with these different regional titles. And so for Unwound Future, that's the North American title. Europe and Australia know the game as Professor Layton and the Lost Future. Whereas the subtitle in Japan is Saigo no Jikan Ryoko, which kind of roughly translates to the final or last time travel. So it's generally interpreted as the last time travel. So yeah, just different names, but we're all talking about the same game here. It's developed by and published in Japan by Level 5, and then it was published worldwide by Nintendo. Professor Layton and the Unwound Future was released for Nintendo DS on November 27th, 2008 in Japan. It would take almost 2 years to come westward on September 12th, 2010 in the United States, which was actually moved up 8 days from its initial date reveal at E3 2010 that year, which I found interesting. Not many games get that distinction. But then it was almost a month later, October 21st and 22nd, 2010, in Australia and Europe, respectively. So the Layton series at its heart, they're adventure games. A lot of point-and-click exploring the world, try to find little kind of currency bits in nooks and crannies here and there.
Hint coins.
Yeah, hint coins. They're kind of critical because these are adventure games where solving puzzles is critical to progress the story forward. In the case of Professor Layton and the Unwound Future, the overall plot involves Professor Herschel Layton receiving a letter from his apprentice Luke Triton, but Luke is from 10 years in the future. And so this future Luke wishes to bring the puzzle-solving hero of the present into the future. It's a terrible one because it's been caused by an evil Professor Layton. So you get some time traveling, you get some puzzle solving, overall, the Layton series is really a game series that can be enjoyed by people of all ages. Because, the brain teasers can be, interesting or effective for those who are young, and even for those who are old. It's almost like, the Brain Age games. The Brain Age games caught on DS with those more adult gamers, even those into their senior years. So it's an interesting story on that front, but even disregarding the puzzles, it's one of the best narrative mystery series of its era, I would say, alongside Ace Attorney. And it has these simple storybook-like visuals that kind of make it feel like it's really inspired by Studio Ghibli films.
Unwound Future specifically seems to take a lot of cues from Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah, certainly.
So yeah, I've never actually thought of it that way until you literally just brought it up. or like, I believe probably a big chunk of the Layton Mobile is probably inspired by Lupin the Third, which has its connections to Studio Ghibli as well.
Maybe. That's certainly plausible. But a lot of the cutscenes, I mean, they are characters talking back and forth to each other with some voice acting. But then there's also some full motion video. And, kind of on DS, it's a little crunched down on that smaller resolution screen. Unwound Future in particular has about 32 minutes of this FMV sort of cutscene style. Game was received rather well overall critically. It's a Metacritic of 86, and fans generally consider Unwound Future to either be the best in the 6-game series or their personal favorite of the series. It ends on a to be continued note, but then the games following it, as I said, were a prequel trilogy. So Professor Layton and Luke Triton's story beyond this point in the canon has not been explored further.
I actually think I forgot that it ends on a to be continued thing.
Right? Yeah.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah, it's Luke is going overseas to study some more, and he really doesn't want to go, but then he sends Layton a letter back and says, there's this mystery that I've come across, and...
Right, pulling an old Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, so there's surely adventures to be had. So, I mean, I've played this game. I love this game. I think it's my favorite and the best of the 6. And it sounds like you have some familiarity with it as well.
I've played all 6 Layton games. I played them in preparation for Layton vs. Ace Attorney. And also because my roommate, Ben, who many of you might be familiar with from shows I've done in the past, he is the biggest Layton fan I know. And he's the one that introduced me to the series. They make me feel like an idiot, but they're very good.
Oh, yeah. I think it's a series that there is no shame in looking up walkthroughs to move along with puzzles. I mean, give them the old college try, certainly, but there's no shame in looking them up to progress onto the story. I mean, that's for sure.
There were multiple instances while I was playing. I played these games while I was working at a summer camp, and Ben worked there as well, and we shared the same cabin for the year that I played all 3 of them. All 3 of the original trilogy, as well as Last Spectre. And it was just this pattern of, I would sit there on a puzzle for 10, 20 minutes. About, I can't do it. I'm a stupid idiot. I can't do this. And I would hand it to Ben. He'd solve it in 5 minutes. Less than that, maybe.
And they're tricky. Certainly that's what the series is known for. So they're no slouch when it comes to that. But it really has a memorable score throughout the whole series. Layton music has its own feeling, wouldn't you say?
I would agree with that. I was trying to, while talking to Ben, actually, just a few minutes before recording, I was trying to figure out a descriptor for Layton music, and I couldn't really.
Yeah, it's a weird eclectic mix. I mean, there's some guitar, there's some piano, but I think the one instrument that really defines the soundtrack is the accordion.
Mm-hmm.
They use the accordion so frequently throughout the series that it really becomes a standout, and that's really all because of the composer throughout the whole series, and that's Tomohito Nishiura. Tomohito Nishiura was born on February 13th, 1973, in the Setagaya Prefecture in Tokyo, Japan. he learned to play music at a young age. It feels like a common thing to say. His instruments that he's known for playing are guitar and piano, which he apparently has Eric Clapton and folk music as influences. Now, he started working for Riverhill Software in 1997, and he made some of the sound effects on the game Overblood 2, which I can't say I've heard of, but he still impressed some of the developers at the time with his diligence. And so the director of Overblood 2 was a man named Akihiro Hino. Akihiro Hino you may know as the head of Level 5, and because Hino is going to make a new game company called Level 5, he was so impressed with Nishiura that he asked him to join him on Level 5 as the audio lead. So eventually, the next big game that Level 5 made with the help of Sony Computer Entertainment at the time was an RPG called Dark Cloud. And so Nishiura handled all of the sound elements for Dark Cloud. I mean, that was one of his first time composing a game soundtrack, so that was a big deal for him. But to have one man take care of all of the sound, I mean, sound effects, dialogue, mix, everything sound related for a big RPG like that at the time, that was a big deal and just a lot to handle, certainly. But he blended his guitar playing and his guitar knowledge with traditional RPG influences into that score. And that's about all I could find of Nishiura's history. And it's kind of just like how he worked his way into the industry. I mean, he has his discography where he composed for Dark Cloud and also Dark Cloud 2, which is what it's known here stateside, but the game's known in Japan as Dark Chronicle. Rogue Galaxy was another Level 5 game, and then he's been the main composer for all of the Layton games. Even heading up and with assistance from others, but Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, like that crossover, mostly his composing work there. He also is a sound designer and audio dialogue editor on the Yokai Watch series, which is one of the big series that Level 5 works on at the moment. So he's still a big deal at Level 5, certainly. But when I was trying to look up elements of this soundtrack's history, I was kind of shocked to just see everywhere just be barren. I mean, Wikipedia entries, Wikia entries, fandom. There aren't interviews with Nishiura to kind of give any insight. And it's like, why is there nothing about the soundtrack? I mean, I guess what you could say is that Unwound Future is more epic than Curious Village and Diabolical Box. I mean, it's the conclusion of the trilogy, so it's a little more epic that way. But also, they use live recorded orchestration for the first time in this series, and only for some songs. But instead of that DS sort of MIDI sound font, some songs you're getting actual recorded orchestra, and it really shows. But yeah, I mean, Layton music is really all defined by, accordion, piano, strings, and guitar included in that, and music boxes. I mean, just kind of those range of instruments really kind of make the Professor Layton series with its own style.
So this is not my favorite soundtrack in the Layton series. I should say that. My favorite is actually Last Spectre, but this is a very, very close second.
Yeah. And
I would agree that it's got its own feeling, and Unwound Future specifically just has this more bombastic feeling to it. It makes sense considering, like you said, it's the finale, and also the finale of the game itself, which is way bigger than what the other two had. Because Layton games are built around their finales.
Yes, absolutely.
It is all about the twist at the end, and that's what most people remember about about Layton games, because they're usually really dumb, but done very well, except in the case of Last Spectre.
Yeah. The Layton games are ones that you can spoil with a sentence, and that's odd to say, but
yeah,
just a single sentence can just put the whole thing to pieces. And so this is the point where I'll say it's been 10 years since Unwound Future, even longer for Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. These are games that we'll probably have to spoil to talk about.
Yeah, very much so.
And if that's an issue for you, I apologize. I mean, we have timestamps in our show notes if you want to jump to learn about the different aspects of the history of the games. But when it comes to the critical tracks and the history of all of that, there are some things we can't just dance around. So that's my warning up front. So that being said, let's get into the 5 critical tracks for Professor Layton and the Unwound Future. We're going to start with the Unwound Future. So this is the main theme of the game. It's one of those ones that's live orchestra recorded, and you can really tell on this one. It actually just makes the performances all the more impressive, because shouts out to the accordion and the jazz piano, because those live performances are fantastic solo just work and performance, and it's really something to behold. When you look at the character themes or just music from other games, like it's easy to put it in a computer. But when you actually are hearing live musicians perform, like that's really something special. But yeah, this plays at key moments in the game. I mean, it's the title theme, the main theme. So it's an important song. And of course, this is also a song where it falls prey to all the different names of the game, right? So the Unwound Future, well, that's the American name. So in Europe and Australia, it's the theme of the Lost Future, or in Japan, it's the theme of the Last Time Travel. So it's just one of those things you have to keep track and be mindful of. But for our sake, it's the Unwound Future.
See, you give a shout out to the piano and the accordion, which both very much deserve that shout out. But like, let's not discount the violinist here.
Oh yeah, they kill it.
They're rocking it. Like, oh man, in every Layton main theme, basically, the violinist is just crushing it. And this one is one of the better ones.
It certainly is. It's definitely a very memorable theme. Second critical track, we're going to go with A Quiet Town. Certainly not a complicated piece by any means. It's this slow string waltz. Da, 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 da. It's really somber and sorrowful, actually, if you think about it. But it's another town navigation piece. I think it actually plays in the underground.
I believe so.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because London, the above ground of London, has its own sort of main theme, and it's got that sort of sense to it.
Which I will say, I prefer the one that plays in the above ground London, which I know that is on your cutting room floor, and we'll get to it. But that is the one I personally prefer.
Yeah. It's just, this one really screams out as like, it's this game's town navigation theme. The London theme like kind of goes across all of the games, which is why I think I put it on the cutting room floor, because I think I do like it more personally as well. But it's another series-defining song that goes across multiple games. So, but this one is just, it's uniquely Unwound Future. The third critical track, let's go with Puzzle Battle. Now, puzzle themes are these kind of light, just sort of airy themes that you're not supposed to pay too much attention to because you're focusing on the puzzle at hand. But at certain moments in this game, you have puzzle battles where Layton is testing his wits against key characters at key moments. And so the puzzle theme gets ramped up. I mean, the accordion gives this great pace to it, just this frenetic intensity. And the melody from the violin, of course, nails it. But it's just these critical moments of the game are defined by these puzzle battles. And so it's another song that's like, you absolutely think of Unwound Future when you hear it, as opposed to any other Layton game. And it's a strong one.
This is my favorite song on the soundtrack, like 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also just, every time I hear it, I remember puzzle battles never come back. They're in this game.
Yeah.
And then not in any other game in the series, which is a shame because they're really cool in Unwound Future.
It's a great idea. Absolutely. So yeah, I'm shocked it never really came back in that same way.
But yeah, this song is 100% like a big part of why they're so cool. And it's also just like, it's the same thing you get from like Sherlock Holmes, where it's a battle of wits between two really smart people. And it's just my favorite way of showing off just how really smart Layton is. So I'm sad that this never comes back in the series at all, be it the song or the mechanic.
Layton is very smart, and that ties into the fourth critical track. It's called The Professor's Deductions. I mean, this plays at a big moment in the game where he's gathered everyone in the bar area to basically said, I've figured out the whole mystery. It's the reveal of the whodunit. And I mean, get out now if you really don't want the spoilers here. Because the idea of traveling in time sounds so far-fetched to begin with, right? It's just not something that should be possible. But in this game, they kind of make you believe that like, oh, there's these different versions of these characters. And okay, well, you're kind of suspended in the fiction's sort of disbelief in a way. But then they kind of bring you back down to earth. And it's like, oh, when you're really traveling through time, you're really traveling to a whole underground city that is constructed by this mastermind who is future Luke, because of course he can't be future Luke. He's this boy named Clive. Shoutouts to Yuri Lowenthal. Goddamn, that's some great performance. I mean, Liam O'Brien as Dimitri Allen as well, the kind of second antagonist there. So good voice casting for a Layton game back in 2010. But I mean, yeah, with that whole thing, the whole ruse falls apart very quickly.
They built an underground London.
Mm-hmm.
All of the Layton games, even Professor Layton versus Ace Attorney, have really like out there twists of it wasn't this supernatural thing. It can be explained through this and this and this, and
it was drugs.
that is what Diabolical Box is, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it was like hallucinogenic rocks. I don't remember.
Was it the water? Something like that.
It was something to do with that. But like this one, I think is the second most far-fetched of all of them. Last
Yeah.
Spectre will never be topped. There's nothing that could top Last Spectre's thing.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
But not only is it a giant underground London that somehow no one noticed, but there's also like a giant Howl's Castle style tank thing.
Yeah, Clive pulls out this big tower and it breaks through and starts trampling over actual London. It's ridiculous, and no one wants to talk about the casualties that are caused by that.
God, no.
Just forget about that. But the point of the music is
this song is very, very, very good.
Again, it's not a complex song, but it really defines like kind of narrowing the focus and kind of trying to trap the mastermind. And it's Layton's mind at work. And it's really, it's another song where it's like, yes, like gotta talk about this song from this soundtrack. But I don't think there's a single moment that we can't avoid talking about this. And this song in particular, we have to talk about time travel.
I'm just gonna get real sad now.
I wrote on our outline, just in all lowercase, oh no, this song.
Yeah.
Because, man, this game gives you a wallop. I mean, and I'm glad, you're not alone in that sense. When you look at other people's YouTube comments about when they played Unwound Future, they're like, oh yeah, I cried. I cried so hard. Like, and family members like, why are you crying? And I'm like, play this. And then they cried, and it's like, yes, absolutely. So, because it's the third game in the Layton series, Professor Layton's always been built up as he's this professor, he's so smart, he solves all these puzzles, but we don't really dive into what makes the professor the man that he is. And this game does that by going back to his past and showing how his girlfriend at the time, Claire, really kind of humanized him, gave him his iconic hat. Don't take the hat off. It really suits you. Kind of just pushing towards the future that they were trying to build together. Even with the rival of Don Paolo and how his unrequited love drove him to be Layton's rival in these first three games. Like, everything brings it all together, and it's all about Claire. Everybody loves Claire. So when Layton and Luke are in this underground London, but they think it's the future, and there's this girl, Celeste, and boy, she looks an awful lot like Claire, but it can't be Claire. She died in our present, 10 plus years ago. We can't be her, because she died in a horrible explosion accident, which is Clive's parents also died in that accident, and that's why he's taking revenge, etc., etc. And so at the end, they throw this twist. It's like, well, yeah, I know, time travel seems ridiculous, but time travel worked. That's not Celeste you've been working with this whole time. It's actually been Claire. And Claire can only stay so long in this present because, she got sent forward 10 years to help you, and now she has to go away again.
Not even just has to go away, specifically has to go back to the explosion to die in the explosion.
Mm-hmm. But for Layton, it's like losing her a second time and like reliving that trauma and having to see her go. And so the game ends on this heartbreaking moment and, cueing this ending theme of time travel. In the Japanese version of the game, there are lyrics, vocals sung by Anne Sally. But in the English version, it's this instrumental. There's also a piano version on the soundtrack, which isn't used in game, but still excellent, highly recommended.
I very much like the piano version the best, I think.
But the oboe that comes in for the vocals, are you kidding me? Using live recorded oboe? It's so good. And man, it's just heartbreak. I mean, you see Layton, who's this rock, break down in tears, show real emotion, and the game ends with him taking off his hat. So if you ever wonder, what does Professor Layton look like without his hat? You got to go through the awful, miserable emotions of the Unwound Future.
The idea that a man taking off a hat, just the simple act of that is like one of the more emotional video game experiences I've ever had in my life. Is really weird to say, but it really is that. Like, I cannot stress enough, this is the only time he takes off his hat in the entire original trilogy.
Absolutely.
He doesn't ever, I don't remember if he does it in the prequel trilogy ever.
No, yeah.
Like, this is the moment. This is the one time. The dude gets in sword fights, and still the hat never comes off. And it's just that one moment, and especially given the backstory of, she gave him the hat, that's why he doesn't take it off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of just repeating what you're saying at this point. But, like, it's really weird to think about that one trivial thing.
And so, I'm actually going to play video and audio clips here. So your first time on the show, brace yourself. But I wanted to highlight what the real difference of the title changes between regions, how it really plays out. We'll actually start with the Europe and Australian version.
We had so many plans for the future. You won't forget, will you? Our shared past and our lost future.
And like, that's perfect writing. Like, that's so good. But then, as we experienced it, just to compare the two, the American version is markedly not as effective.
We had so many plans for the future. Do you remember, Herschel? I'll miss you. And our unwound future.
I mean, you can even tell with the stammering to match lip flaps, and so that's kind of disappointing. I just found that very interesting that with the different title changes, like, it really affected that key moment of the ending there. So we could talk, I'm sure, just longer about Claire and that moment in particular, but it is like the moment from this game, and it has such a great song to represent it. I know that everyone, myself included, adores the main Professor Layton character theme. The theme of Professor Layton. It is the damn best. But we're just going to leave that one in Curious Village, okay? I don't even think it's technically on, like, the soundtrack here. Of course, it plays in the game. It's Professor Layton's theme. Like, it's his character theme. It's 10 out of 10, but I just didn't want to include it here. So in case you're wondering, that's not why it's on the Critical 5 here.
It's just like when I did Kingdom Hearts 2 and didn't include Dearly Beloved.
Right. No, absolutely. So for my songs that are on the cutting room floor, I'll throw a shout out to Puzzles Reinvented. This is also known as Puzzles 3. I think it's the best main puzzle theme in the series.
I agree.
Though Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney's Puzzle 7, I think is actually better because it has more instruments built into it. Some of the other puzzle themes, just going through the DS or 3DS speakers, just get really distorted and weird, but Puzzles 3 here strikes the right balance.
Should be noted that this is the first time that technically, yes, this is Puzzles 3, and Diabolical Boxes is technically Puzzles 2, but Diabolical Boxes' music it's the same theme as Curious Village, just a little bit of, I think, more instruments added, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they add a couple instruments, yep. Mm-hmm.
But it's still the same song. So
yes.
This was the first time that there was a different puzzle theme for a Layton game.
And there's a Puzzles 4, which is like a darker version of this. I just like the happier, cheery version. Mm-hmm. The other song on the cutting room floor for me is More London Streets. So as we mentioned earlier, this is just a quintessential Layton song. I mean, it's defining London, like the city, dirty, as it is, just kind of grimy with different characters to ask about, solve puzzles, but the accordion and strings, it goes so well with exploring the town and finding those hint coins. Find all of those hint coins.
One of the bonus tracks on the actual soundtrack, by the way, is a live version of this song, which is, I don't think it includes the accordion. It's much more sort of subdued to start, and it sounds a lot more mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a fantastic version of the song.
Absolutely. So what will I never forget about this game? We've already kind of said it, but Claire, wait. You can't go. I don't want to say goodbye again. I can't. I won't. I mean, like that is this game in a nutshell. I don't remember like any of the puzzles that take place. I remember certain moments like constructing a coin machine gun in the casino.
So I first saw that scene over Ben's shoulder on a plane to Youmacon, and it happened, and he noticed I was watching, and he just sort of looked down, closed his DS, and then we both just started cracking up. I love that scene so much.
But man, Claire and her character and what she means to the Layton series, it's a big deal, and it's one of those big gut punches, man. It's real tough.
I would agree with that. I think that is also what I would remember the most. I mean, that's the easy answer, right?
Yeah.
I don't think there is another answer for anybody that's played Unwound Future.
No, you gotta say that one for sure. So let's transition and highlight either a person on OC Remix or on YouTube that has done a fan cover of one of the songs. I came across a YouTube channel called Mr. Accordion, and he's known for doing a cover of Cass's theme from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, because of course, it's a great accordion piece. But he also did a cover of Theme of the Last Time Travel, and so that's going back to the Unwound Future, the main theme there. Great cover on accordion. Please enjoy. We'll be right back. So I think I have some more things to say.
Objection!
Oh, okay. I was going to talk more about Layton, but all right, jeez.
It's my turn, and I'm here to talk about Gyakuten Saibon.
Well, Joe, what's that?
Gyakuten Saibon was a game released by Capcom in 2001 for the Game Boy Advance. We do not know it by that name, but don't worry. I've got a whole storytelling arc that I'm going to go through with this. Don't worry. It is a visual novel mystery game where you play as a defense attorney who is trying to prove his client's innocence, always with a murder trial. They've always been accused of murder. Literally, there are 6 of these games, plus 4 spin-off games and a crossover, and it's always murder. Except for in the crossover. Funnily enough, well, technically, it's a mix.
Whole lot of murder.
But it is the brainchild of director Shu Takumi, and the way it came about was he had just finished directing the game Dino Crisis 2 for the PlayStation. If you do not know what Dino Crisis is, it's another Capcom franchise. It's Resident Evil, but dinosaurs instead of zombies. That's literally all it is. I believe it's even on the same engine and everything. And his boss, Shinji Mikami, who is another legendary ex-Capcom dude, famous for creating Resident Evil, he, in what I can only assume was a drunken stupor, because I don't know how else this would have happened, said, all right, you have 6 months, Mr. Takumi, make whatever you want. So Takumi decided, I want to make an adventure game because that's why I joined Capcom. That's the kind of game that I wanted to make in the first place. It was developed in 10 months, less than a year, by a team of 7 people.
That's insane.
All of the team were developers with very little experience outside of Takumi himself. 2 people did all of the art. 2 people handled all of the programming. 1 person handled all of the music. There was 1 producer, and then Takumi himself was the planner, scenario writer, and director all at the same time.
So it was like the opposite of Tommy Wiseau, because this game is actually great as opposed to The Room.
Kind of, in more ways than you would think, actually. So, originally, the plan was to make the game for the Game Boy Color, which I did not know.
That's nuts. I had no idea.
I had no idea. What saved it from that fate was Shu Takumi saw footage of Mega Man Battle Network, which was a Game Boy Advance game that Capcom was working on, and decided, the Game Boy Advance looks pretty cool. Let's move development over to that.
When you talk about like the character models and how they look, I could have only imagined, for Battle Network. Like looking at, I can't even think of the main character's name, the one that helps kind of control Mega Man, but you're looking at like those anime-like faces, and you're probably thinking like, yeah, that's closer to what we're aiming for than whatever Game Boy Color can render.
I can't even imagine what the game would have looked like on a Game Boy Color.
I know.
Like, how would that have been? What would that have looked like?
The lack of buttons, everything.
It was purposely designed to play as simply as humanly possible because Takumi wanted to make a game that even his mother could play. And this worked out for the best. It goes without saying that it's a visual novel, so it doesn't play super hard. Even if you've never really played video games, you can play Ace Attorney. My sister, who does not enjoy video games, has played the entire original trilogy of Ace Attorney.
Nice.
And originally, the main character was not going to be a attorney. He was going to be a private investigator who is accused of murder, and when he goes to court, his defense attorney is so inept that he takes up his own defense. And that was going to be the whole game. And then Takumi kind of realized that picking out the contradictions and stuff, which was what he wanted to build the game around, didn't really fit a private investigator's job. So they made the move to being, as we know today, a defense attorney. The Wikipedia article said that one of the staff members suggested that Phoenix be a hamster. I could find zero elaboration on this. Trust me, I looked. But how am I supposed to not mention that?
You kind of have to. If everyone's animals, I think that changes the whole thing.
The working title for the game, which before they decided on Gyakuten Saibon, these are like 3 of my favorite things I found out about this game that I did not know before. The working title was Survivon, Attorney Detective Naruhodo-kun.
Okay.
Of course, named after Ryuichi Naruhodo, who is the main character. Other names that were considered include Boogie Woogie Innocence.
No.
And Bingo Bango.
No.
Both awful names. And we might not know it as Gyakuten Saibon in America, but they made the correct choice. Boogie Woogie Innocence. The game actually almost got canceled at one point because 2 staff members left Capcom during development. Remember, this game was only in development for 10 months, and they lost 2 staffers in that short span of time. But they were able to rope in one of the people off of the Resident Evil team to come work on it part-time while they were working on, I assume, what would have been, Resident Evil 3? I am not super familiar with the Resident Evil franchise in terms of years.
I mean, 2001, 2 was 98.
So it might have been 3.
3 or 0 or Code Veronica, one of those 2. Or 3.
Yeah. So yeah, it didn't get canceled, obviously. It came out, but America never saw a release of that GBA game. And then 4 years later, it and its 2 sequels got remade for the Nintendo DS. And we got that one. It was brought over here and localized as the name that we all know it by, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney.
Now, Gyakuten Saiban, I need to remember what it was translated.
Turnabout trial.
Turnabout trial. I was going to say turnabout courtroom, so turnabout trial makes sense. So, like, the name in Japan makes sense. So, I mean, whenever people say Gyakuten Saiban, what is, like, it does check out over there. I mean, certainly better than Boogie Woogie Innocence. But
the game is famous / maybe kind of infamous for its localization, because every single character was renamed. All of them. Because the game was so heavily based around every character having a pun in their name. But I don't get Japanese puns. You don't get Japanese puns. People that speak English don't understand those puns, so they had to change every single one. So, Ryuichi Naruhodo became Phoenix Wright. Mitsurugi Reiji became Miles Edgeworth. Even small side characters, which are where you see the more, like, obvious puns. Like, Aochi Takefumi became Winston Payne, which his name is Ouchie. His Japanese name is Ouchie. I didn't know that.
yeah,
That's
okay.
so good. And it is actually supposed to be like the American word ouchie. Like, that's actually what it is supposed to be. That's beautiful.
That's amazing.
And also, yeah, there were other localization changes. I could get into like 2 hours of talk about the localization of Phoenix Wright. I had to pare down a lot of the stuff because legitimately there's so much information about it. It's fascinating. But yeah, a lot of stuff was changed. Like, instead of, I think Maya likes sushi in the original Japanese. Is it sushi or is it onigiri or what is it actually supposed to be? I don't remember what it's supposed to be, but whatever it is, it was changed to hamburgers in the American adaptation. I think that the name changes were the best thing they could have done. I think they really kept the feeling of the original Japanese while still making it like it's understandable to us non-Japanese speakers. But what they did not great was the localization moved the setting from Japan to Los Angeles, California. And this wasn't a big deal in the first game because the setting is never really mentioned in the first game.
Probably why they did it.
Yeah, outside of, I think one of the cases involved, the first case, if I remember correctly, involves time zones.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So they decided, yeah, we'll just set it in America. It's fine. Then in the later two games, the Japanese setting became like in your face obvious. And they were kind of just stuck with, well, I guess we got to figure out some way this Japanese village makes sense to be near Los Angeles.
Channeling spirits with Japanese houses and those screen doors. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of came back and bit them pretty hard later on. Fun facts. Other names that were in consideration for Phoenix. Wright was always like the name they had in mind for his last name. It was very early on decided because it fit very well when compared to his Japanese last name, Naruhodo, which roughly translates to I see or I understand. So the list of names that were considered that I could find on Wikipedia were as follows. Roger Wright, which specifically was rejected because it sounded too close to Roger Rabbit, according to them. Pierce Wright, Xavier Wright, Marcus Wright, and Zane Wright.
I could get on with Pierce.
Pierce isn't bad. Marcus isn't terrible. Zane is bad.
Guess.
Zane is a bad name for him. They decided on Phoenix because it sounded the most heroic. And hey, now we know him as Phoenix Wright, and it also was able to be changed to Nick.
That did help a lot. It's the right choice in the end.
Obviously, in the DS version, a fifth case was added called Rise from the Ashes, or in Japanese, Yomigeru Gyakuten. I've never played it because I played the original trilogy on the Wii as they were released on WiiWare. And in the first game, Rise from the Ashes didn't come with it. It was supposed to be released as DLC, and then I'm pretty sure it never was.
Oh, that's right.
Every time we checked, it would say, this is unavailable. It's unavailable at this time. Can't download it yet. So I've just never played, because Ace Attorney 1 is one of the ones that I think the problem with Ace Attorney games is that you have to wait a really long time before replays.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like reading a book. It's always the same.
Yeah.
To get to Rise from the Ashes, you have to play the whole game again.
Right.
And I've never done that. Maybe I will, because the game has been released on everything. It's been released on mobile phones, iOS specifically. I don't think it ever came out on Android.
I don't think so. But this week is the release of the trilogy on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC, which is why we are talking about it.
Not just this week. Today.
Oh,
the day this is coming, the day this episode is airing, that all comes out. So yeah. Maybe I'll get to Rise from the Ashes there. Who knows? I've just never been able to make it all the way there to play this case, which is apparently supposed to be one of the hardest cases the series has ever seen.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely hard. It's also about 5 hours long, so like it's long. And it's okay. It's not among the best cases, but it's certainly interesting because you're talking about like chief prosecutors and things in that time in the canon for Ace Attorney. So that's certainly interesting. It was the big deal because it was using DS specific features. So I mean, it's touchscreen, putting powder on there and blowing stuff off. I mean, it's the introduction of Emma Skye, the detective. So like that's her introduction into the series. So when she comes into later games and you're like, who is this character? Like that's where she makes her first appearance. It's a good thing to play, but I don't know if it's necessarily essential, but it's a good thing to get to.
The original trilogy never mentions it, obviously, because it was created after all three games already existed. So you're probably not missing a bunch until you get to Apollo Justice and she is the detective you're working with.
I also think it's important to mention that Akemi Kimura arranged the composer's original work from the Game Boy Advance games to the DS sound font. And then they also, for this Rise from the Ashes case, composed new music. So I don't really want to add those tracks into our look into the soundtrack here. Let's look at like the original work of the composer.
It should be noted that I didn't actually realize the music had been redone for the DS remakes until like last week when I went to listen to the soundtracks on Spotify, because all of them are on Spotify. Every single soundtrack in the series except for Layton versus Ace Attorney, because that's not a Capcom thing.
Capcom's doing a great job with that for sure. Yeah.
But it's all the GBA ones. The original trilogy is all the GBA versions, and you can tell.
Yeah.
You can tell. They're not bad, but when you're used to listening to the DS versions, it's obvious. And it just sounds off. That being said, Ace Attorney has done super well since its creation. It got 2 other sequels on the GBA that would also be remade for the DS, and then later a 4th sequel on the DS, 2 sequels on the 3DS. It has 2 spin-off series, both with 2 games each, which I didn't know that. I didn't know Daigyakuten got a second game.
Oh, yes.
Second game that we aren't ever going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Only one of those spin-off games has come here, and the rest have stayed Japan exclusive, and seemingly are always going to.
Which is a shame, because the second Miles Edgeworth game is so good. Like, find a fan translation to play that through cough cough means. But it's so fantastic. Like, it's really a shame that the second one for Ace Attorney Investigations never came here.
That's what I hear. I haven't played it for that exact reason. And the Daigyakuten games sound really cool, but we're definitely never getting those, because apparently they're untranslatable, unlocalizable. I have no idea what the reasoning is, but
Sherlock Holmes. Some issues with that, probably.
That also could be the case. And also, Phoenix himself has been included in multiple crossover games, including the aforementioned Professor Layton versus Ace Attorney. He and Maya appear in Project Cross Zone 2, where it is made canon that he once defended Goro Majima from the Yakuza series, which I find really, really funny. The exact line is, he told Majima not to punch the judge. That was good advice. And he is also a playable fighter in the fighting game Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which he was included pretty much entirely because of fan demand. Like, people wanted Phoenix Wright in that game.
He is an odd, quirky, playable character, but it's so good.
It's so good. He's my main. I'm really bad at him. I can't play him to save my life, but I refuse to play literally any other character. It is definitely a more niche franchise, among Capcom's more niche franchises, but it's still, I would say, one of their more iconic franchises in general.
Yeah, this trilogy is like $30 max. I mean, if you haven't, please do yourself the favor and play these games.
Absolutely. All of the music was done by, except for in the fifth case, obviously, as we covered, all the music in the original game was done by Masakazu Sugimori. Let me tell you about Masakazu Sugimori. Well, I've been over all the information I could find over on him. I can't find anything. I can't find where he was born. I can't find when he started working at Capcom. I found what other games he worked on, and I found that he left Capcom in 2007 with 3 other Capcom composers to form a company called Design Wave, which has done music for other games, including on his discography, the most recent game that he has apparently worked on. He did music for Breath of Fire 4. He was the composer for Beautiful Joe. And he was also the composer for Shu Takumi's other big game, Ghost Trick Phantom Detective.
Oh, that soundtrack rules. That game is so good.
Like, those last 2 games are pretty big, well-known games. Why can't I find anything about this man?
I don't know. That's really weird. Like, our composers are ghosts.
Like, at least you were able to find where the dude was born. I can't even find how old he is.
He could have been a child prodigy at the time that he worked on Ace Attorney.
I can't find any information on this dude. That being said, I also couldn't find any information on the soundtrack, which is also shocking, because this is an iconic soundtrack in video games, just in general, and I can't find anything about why it is the way it is.
Sorry, guys, but we really tried this week.
I tried so hard. I did find some fun facts having to do with the sound design, and that is the most iconic thing to come out of the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series is, of course, the sound bubbles that appear during the courtroom sections. In Japanese, it is igari. In English, it is obviously objection, or hold it, or not so fast, isn't that? No, not so fast is something else. That's somebody else in a later game.
Somebody else's, yeah.
It's hold it.
Yeah, hold it.
Hold it, objection.
Take that.
Take that, yeah. Those have little sound bites to them. They have voice acting to them. In Japanese, everybody recorded one. Everybody on the team, all 7 members of the team recorded one, and they decided to use the best ones. Shu Takumi, quote, used his privilege to cast himself as the main character.
Why not? If you're the director, the writer, all that, yeah, by all means.
He plays Ryuichi Naruhodo. Edgeworth's voice was provided by Tatsuro Iwamoto, who was one of the artists on the team. And Sugimori himself is Von Karma.
That is interesting. I wonder, like, how deep his voice is then in Japanese, because when it got localized, it was just like, objection. And it's like, oh, Jesus, okay.
Another fun fact that I'm sure will get brought up again when this game gets brought to the thing. Do you know who voices Godo in Japanese? The main antagonist of, or not antagonist, but the prosecutor from Ace Attorney Trials and Tribulations. Do you know who voices him in Japanese?
In Japanese, I feel like I've heard this trivia fact before, but I don't remember.
It is one Hideki Kamiya.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yep.
Apparently, Takumi also wanted to be the English voice of Phoenix, but the voice was instead provided by former Capcom USA employee Ben Judd.
Yeah, and so then Ben Judd, when he's popped up doing different PR work, like when Mighty Number 9 was a thing, and he was doing a PR along with Inafune. It was just interesting to see. Like, yeah, he's still working in the industry, and like that's Phoenix Wright.
Could not find anything about who the other two voice actors are in English. Purportedly, they were legitimately just people found around the office, same as the Japanese thing, but I couldn't find names connected to either of them. I want to say that Von Karma is probably just Judd pitched way down.
Yeah.
But that is just my personal guess. I don't have anything to base that on. And that is all I could find on Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney's development or history. Its development is lovingly written down. All of its localization history is lovingly written down. Nothing on the soundtrack.
I mean, it's a beloved series. That makes total sense. But yeah, the soundtrack, it's a classic. So it's surprising that there isn't much there.
I agree. I don't think it is the best Ace Attorney soundtrack. I think that goes to 3, and one day we will talk about that.
Agreed. Yeah, 3 is the best.
But it is a very close second, in my opinion. They're all close seconds except for Justice for All. And I think that Justice for All is the only bad soundtrack in the series. I'm not a fan of that soundtrack, even slightly. But let's talk about the good one. Let's talk about Ace Attorney 1. 5 critical tracks. And we obviously have to start with Phoenix Wright, Objection. This has basically become Phoenix's main theme. Even though it doesn't show up again in the trilogy itself, it does show up in the second trilogy as Phoenix's Objection theme in a lot of spots. And it's also when Marvel vs. Capcom was looking for a theme for Phoenix, this is one of the 2 they chose.
It's a great representation of a character theme. It's heroic in a way, because Phoenix is coming to save the day. Like, oh, the prosecutor is really getting down on the defendant, the person you're trying to save, but we're going to start to turn the tides. And it's like, I'm going to object. And it's not, the badass counter song, of course. And don't worry, we'll get there.
Oh, yeah.
But this is definitely heroic, and it's a good character theme.
And I don't think it's any mistake that this would be the one that would come back and just become Nick's main theme. I don't even think it's the best Objection theme. Again, that's 3's, but
also agreed.
Anyways, let's get into the second one, which is Examination, both moderate and allegro. You might be asking yourself, Joe, you can't put 2 songs.
Yes, you can.
They're the same song. I can't not include both of these, and it would be stupid to have them be their own entries.
Well, they go together really nicely. There's the point for it in the story where, there's certain levels of questioning of witnesses on the stand. So,
So this plays in the courtroom when you are cross-examining a witness. Moderate plays when it's just starting out. You're just trying to get a foothold, find that one little strand that you can start pulling at, and the witness is pretty confident that you're not going to find it. And then once you do find it and everything starts really unraveling and they start panicking or the situation becomes more dire, then it changes into allegro. And that's when you know that, like, oh, I'm getting close. I think these might actually be my favorite examination songs in the series. But not by a long shot, obviously. Like, again, I'm going to keep bringing it back to this. Threes is really close up there. And, like, I like Apollo Justice's a lot, too. But these are just... They get your blood pumping. Allegro especially.
This one has, like, meme potential in a way. Because, like, whenever you're thinking of, like, cross-examining, like, it's so easy for people to think back to this song. And it is so fitting. I think I like Threes the most, but this is iconic to the series, and it had to be here.
Next, we have Turnabout Sisters theme. So this is the main theme for Maya Fey, who is your sort of sidekick character throughout the game. She is... A lot of people I've noticed, like, really dislike Maya to start. And I disliked Maya at the start, but over the years and playing all the games, I love Maya. She's so good. Yeah. And it makes me sad that there are 2 entire games where she just doesn't show up.
So I don't know if you remember playing... Ace Attorney Investigations 1, but there's the scene where Edgeworth is doing something, and then you see, like, Phoenix and Maya, like, pixelated in the background, and, like, they're on the river doing something or whatever, and it's like...
I think Pearl is there, too, but I don't remember.
Maybe. But everyone's just like, there's Maya finally, again.
There's a reason why it was such a big deal, why for the latest mainline game, Spirit of Justice, it was a big deal that Maya was coming back. Finally, Maya's back.
Oh, yeah.
Because in Apollo Justice and Dual Destiny, she just doesn't show up. There are mentions of her in Apollo Justice. One of the few things I really, really remember about that game is that when Phoenix is in the hospital, I think during the second case, he is surrounded by a bunch of Steel Samurai DVDs, and he mentions some kid sent them to me. And he's talking about Maya. But this is her main theme. This is the happier version of it. She's kind of a troublemaker. She's not a good person. Maya Fey is kind of a bad person. And I love her to death, and she means well, but she's kind of a jerk sometimes. And it seems like her life goal is to make Phoenix's life just miserable, or just try to goad him into being annoyed or mad. But it also has a second version to it, being the Turnabout Sisters ballad. And this song plays mostly during talk about Maya's sister Mia Fey, who was Phoenix's boss, who is murdered in the second trial.
Mia Fey, best character in the whole series. Don't at me.
She's so good, and I think the ballad needs mentioning, but it's the happy version that would go on to be used throughout the rest of the trilogy. And the happy version is the one I remember more, but the sad version just has this context to it that you're not going to get from the regular theme.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to include this one as well because it's definitely Maya's theme. And it's a good point to point out both. I think it's also interesting to note that, you know, with the Layton soundtrack, it's like it's supposed to be this instrument and this instrument and this instrument. You know, for these games, like, you may get some that are like, oh, it's supposed to be this instrument, but it's a lot of just like, it's just good synth work. Mm-hmm. And it's just really catchy and very, very memorable.
After that, we have Search Core. This is the song I think about when I think about the investigation phases, for sure.
Oh yeah.
I know there's that other song, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a different song that is generally considered the theme of investigating. It's a lot more lighthearted, but this is the investigation song in my opinion. It's also the only one that is later brought on throughout the rest of the franchise, I want to say it's even in like some of the later trilogy too. And it's got this frantic, sinister feeling to it. Like you gotta find something. You gotta dig as hard as you can. You gotta find something right now. If you've ever listened to the Gyakuten Meets Orchestra, I think the second one, it's exactly what it sounds like. It was an orchestrated version of the soundtrack. They put out an album that just brought a bunch of songs from the original trilogy and then later from Apollo Justice as well.
I like the jazz band one more, but
jazz one is also very, very good. The second orchestra album, I believe, has an investigation suite that includes one of the songs that you have on your cutting room floor, as well as this song. And the part where this song comes in is probably my favorite moment on any of those Gyakuten Meets Blank albums. Just bar none. Oh, it's so good. And then, let's get into the real meat of it. Investigation Cornered. This is the song. When people talk about the most iconic song, not even just in this game, but probably in the entire Ace Attorney franchise.
Oh yeah.
This is the song.
The cornered themes are staples across all of the Phoenix Wright games. It's the pinnacle. Like if you do a top 5, a critical 5 for every Phoenix Wright game, even the Apollo or the Miles Edgeworth games, like the Pursuit cornered theme is the best.
Yeah. If you've never played Ace Attorney and you're listening to this, do, first off. Second off, this is the song that plays when you got him. You've unraveled all of it. Usually this happens when you have presented like close to the last piece of evidence for that day of trial. And it's just you got him, as the name would suggest. You've cornered them. They cannot get out. You figured it out. You solved the problem. You solved the case. It feels so good when this song starts to play.
Oh, especially when like they try to fight back and like the music stops and it's just this and it's like, oh no, what's gonna happen? But then it's right back in it and it's just like, yeah, we got this, boys. Let's go.
This song, specifically this version of Cornered, is the only one that comes back in the series. Yeah, every game has its own Cornered theme. Some are better than others. Again, I think 3 has the best one, but it's not as iconic as this one.
Absolutely.
But this one comes back in 3. Like there's a moment where I'm not going to give anything away because if you're listening to this, you're not expecting Trials and Tribulations spoilers, even though, again, that game is almost 20 years old.
It comes back at just the right moment, though.
Yeah, something happens, and then this song starts playing, and it's one of the coolest moments in the entire series. And, this song's so good. This was the second song that when Marvel vs. Capcom was looking for a theme for Phoenix, this was also brought in. Because Phoenix has this mechanic where he can pick up evidence throughout the fight. It's a really weird mechanic, and I still don't fully understand how it works. But if he gets the 3 correct pieces of evidence and hits somebody with an objection, he will enter turnabout mode, where this song will replace the theme that was playing before, and he gets to be one of the strongest characters in the entire game.
Yep.
And it's super cool. I don't know what else to say about this song, except that it's one of the most satisfying songs in video games.
Yeah, to leave it off the list would be a crime. Like,
yeah.
Simply talking about crime, simple enough. I mean, just, yeah, it had to be.
So you have a couple of songs on the cutting room floor, and I agree with them.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of narrow down the songs of this soundtrack because it's particularly good. And I was thinking of, does any songs from Rise of the Ashes, like, are they worthy of usurping any of these? And it's like, maybe the Jake Marshall theme, but otherwise not really. No. We got to go with Dick Gumshoe. This is the theme that involves your interactions with Detective Gumshoe, and it's just, I can imagine that this one would sound especially different as far as its instrumentation on Game Boy Advance. It's because it kind of fleshes out the bass sound of this one a little bit more. But this is just a classic theme because you work with Gumshoe a lot in the early days of the case.
I miss Gumshoe.
Gumshoe's lovable.
Do you think he's dead? Where is he? For people that don't know he doesn't show up in any game past the original trilogy. He never shows up again, which is a shame.
It's super weird because Gumshoe's a good dude, but his theme's solid. It's a really, really good piece. But I think when we talk about like the slower songs of this game, because everything can be happy or intense or whatever, but there's a lot of looking back and trying to piece together what happened. So I think Reminiscence DL6 case has to be on my floor list.
Also very good.
Yeah. You gotta put this one because DL6 is the biggin in the original game. I mean, Case 4 is a monster, and it's yeah. I mean, whether it's it involves back to the murder of Edgeworth's father, and the stake that he has in the game, and how does the prosecutor Von Karma get tied up into it? Like looking back on that elevator scene with the losing air and then the bullet hole through it, and there's Yami Yogi in there, and it's just a really sad piece, but a pretty important one.
For mine, I actually have three. One that I just realized I probably should include. The first one being Logic and Trick. This is a very, very simple piece, like extremely simple, but it plays when the facts of the case are being explained.
Yeah.
And it's always made an impact with me. It shows up in all three games, and I don't know, its simplicity works very well for it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got The Steel Samurai.
Yeah!
Which is a fictional theme for a fictional show within the game. It's supposed to be like a tokusatsu show that is a big part of the third case, and then later comes back in the second game to be a big part of one of the best cases in the series, despite that being the weakest game overall, in my opinion.
If you've never heard this theme with lyrics in different covers, get on that. It's fantastic.
Also, this is another one where the orchestrated versions, awesome. They're so good, especially the second one, which I've seen described as if John Williams did the Steel Samurai theme. And the third that I needed to bring up is Police Cell Jailer's Elegy.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the song that plays when you are visiting your client in prison. That's really about it. It's just a very sad piece. It fits very well. I think it's the best detention center theme. I think, just in general, across the whole series.
Yeah, so many of the songs from the soundtrack you could put on here. It's a pretty simplistic soundtrack overall, but it's really effective. And to just think that they did this in less than a year with as few people as they did is just remarkable.
Yeah, this is a soundtrack that it's not easy. It's not hard to get the 5, like, these are the 5 most notable tracks, but then it comes down to like, but then what about this one and this one and this one and this one? Because it's such a good soundtrack overall that, yeah, it's easy to pick the top 5. It's the examination, it's objection, it's cornered. But then, like, we just had 5 songs on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
I think that might be a record.
I think so.
So that should really show that this is a very worthwhile soundtrack. What will I never forget about the game? So there are 2 moments of there's no better feeling than blank in Ace Attorney. One is when you get the right answer, you present the right piece of evidence, or you press the right statement in the witness's testimony, and the music stops.
Yeah.
Which is very weird for me to be talking about on a show about music, but that's a, yeah, got it.
Everyone who's played these games just had that moment where it's like, yeah, that moment. Like, that's awesome.
But there's also the moment when the cornered theme starts playing, and you're like, gotcha, baby!
Mm-hmm.
So good. Like, these games are satisfying to play. There's a reason why people enjoy them so much.
Yeah, I think I'd absolutely agree. It's those moments, and if you play this game with, like, the sound off, for whatever reason, like, you are completely missing out. Even if it's, like, the slightest things as the pitch of the text going by representing the tonality of the character's voice. Like, little things like that, just the smallest things on the limitations at the time, just works wonders.
Art through adversity, I guess.
Mm-hmm, yes. So, great games to talk about, whether it's Layton or Ace Attorney, and games that I think anyone of any age can play. And they're so accessible. But yeah, just we had to kind of put them together regardless. And so go buy the Ace Attorney trilogy on your platform of choice. I think that'd be our biggest recommendation for this week. But that'll do it for this episode of Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at The Dobaga. You can find the video version of this show on the YouTube channel Rhymes with Asia, but the podcast version is over on Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. But of course, I mean, get that MP3 in your ears, through your car, at work, in your headphones. Go to Apple Podcasts, Google Play to download the podcast feed there. The social media for the show is at Soundchat OST, so if you want to recommend a game for us to cover or give us feedback on how we're doing or anything like that, that's where you can reach us best for the show. I think that's really about it. Joe, why don't you play us out?
For my highlight on a remix or cover, I am going to OC Remix today with a song that I have known about and loved for years now. It is called Trance Turnabout by Digi E, and I mainly just really love this song for the exact moment when it switches into the cornered theme because it's so cool. So, yeah, enjoy that. See you guys later.
Thanks for listening to Original Soundchat. Take care.